All right. What's up, everybody? It's Lakeem here at Natural Born Studios. And this is another episode of Capture the Culture Illustrated Masterclass. And today, the purpose of these masterclasses is to teach people how to learn technical skills when it comes to illustration and drawing and artwork in general. Teach you guys basic principles that you can apply to your artwork that'll definitely make it have more of an impact and make it stand out to the viewers who are looking at your artwork. Another purpose for this class is the name of the title, which is Capture the Culture. So each image and illustration that I create in this class is geared towards teaching you guys how to capture culture in the artwork that you're creating, how to approach culture in a way that's more impactful and that can really make a difference in the artwork that you're creating. So I'm excited to be hosting this class, and today I'll be doing a continuation on the illustration that we started the last class, and today's focus is going to be on coloring, how to color in your illustrations using highlights and shadows. And yeah, that's going to be the main focus. So I'm going to dive right in and share my screen. So give me 1 second. And today we're going to get right into it. So Capture the Culture Illustrated Masterclass. So today, in the last class, we worked off a picture reference of Michael Jordan, or I guess I wouldn't call him Michael Jordan, but we used the image of Michael Jordan jumping over a few people, and we captured that moment of him doing that. So I didn't have enough time to complete the image all the way through. So today is just going to be a continuation of what we started last week or last class. So as you see, this is what we came up with. And let's do a quick recap time lapse so you can see what the process was. So we pretty much broke down how to draw the illustration by observing negative space. And in this class, we decided that we were not going to be tracing image. So I challenged myself and the people who are following along to learn how to draw images without having to trace them, or, making the picture transparent and drawing over it, or having a light table. Like, I want to show you guys how you can draw images from your imagination and from your mind, but still looking at the picture reference. So in this lesson, we went through how you start off with a gesture drawing, and then you take that gesture drawing and capture and look at the negative spaces and capture the things in between. Then from there, you make that gesture drawing layer of, you change the opacity and make it more transparent. And then you add another layer on top of that to create more defined lines. And you just do that same process again, where you, on top of the defined lines, you lower the opacity on that one and make more perfected lines as you can. So in this class, we went over how to do the line work and things. So in this class, we're going to be going over the coloring aspect and the shading, and how to make a professional illustration that's easy for coloring in and also easy for production. So let's get to it. This is where we're at today. So I have to recapture the picture reference. I'm not sure what I did with the last one. So let me find the picture reference that we were using. Or actually, let's do this. I'm going to snap new photos of the picture reference. Sorry, I have to cut that out. Drop the iPad. So this is the top part right here. We're going to use that. We're going to use this top part to capture the shading. Then we're going to use this part here to get a closer up on the details of the image. So now that we have our picture reference that we're working with, as you guys saw, I'm also doing this same illustration as a painting. So what I'm going to do is, like definitely after I finish these illustrations, context for me to continue on with the painting that I'm working on, which is the same image. So that's always exciting to be able to create your artwork in multiple forms and mediums. Alrighty, so we're just adjusting the picture references and making room we're just making room for them. And let's see, I'm gonna just kind of adjust it to where it makes sense. And I'm also going to crop it out. So when you're working on a space, like when you're working on anything, a digital platform or in person, you just want to make sure that your workspace is organized so that you can easily have access to things and reference things back and forward. So what I'm doing right now is just cropping out all of the extra room and space that we don't need so that I can have room to really zoom in and out on the illustration while still being able to see my picture references next to it. So I just cropped out the pictures that I'm gonna be using. And we have the top part right here. And then we have the bottom part right there. And it's a little warped, but that's cool because we're mainly focusing on shading and coloring in. So as you see, we've already took the outline and blocked in base colors, meaning I just blocked in solid colors that I will be using for the illustration. Now, what we want to do is go straight into the shadows and highlights. So I like grabbing the color from the original image. And even though his skin tone is a little different, that's fine because the first layers you want to create is just base layers. So when you add the highlights and shadows to it, it's automatically gonna, you can bring in different skin tones that's gonna make it make sense. So what I'm doing here is I'm on my drawing layer and I'm just looking at these where these shadows start. So right here, I see that it's kind of making a loop shape right here. Or if you can't see, I'm looking at this shape right here of shadow space. I'm also looking at this shape here of shadow space. And as well as we see under the arm, like there's these different shapes of shadows that kind of define the muscle. This big shadow right here on his face, the shadow behind his arm. So what I'm highlighting and what I'm looking at now is where are all the places there I'm going to put the shadows so that it can define the form and the muscles and the front and back of the image. So what I like to do is just kind of draw in line. I just kind of draw in where I can see those shapes at. And it's okay if the colors are kind of off, because once you start blocking in colors, you can always, if I want to make it a little lighter, I can always go and get a little lighter color and adjust it, or, so the main goal is to block in the areas of shadows and highlights, because later you can go in and actually adjust the actual colors. So boom, I'm looking at those areas. I see shadows right here. And then I'm also grabbing colors from the image itself. So from here, it's almost like a puzzle where you're figuring out how to, where are these different forms, and how are these forms and shadows defining the muscles and things like that. So let's see. I'm just kind of organically adding shapes where I see shadows fit. And there we go. So sometimes when it fills the whole space, that just means that you have some cracks in your lines that you have to fill in. So this one is, well, it's not letting me shade it in. So I'll just shade it in manually. Nope. All right. And it's okay to cover up some of your black lines, because once you get your shading and shadowing down, you can go back in with your line work and really redefine where the lines were. And another way to do this as well is also having all of your colors on a separate layer. Like right now, I have my line work and my colors on the same layer. And I like doing it like that sometimes because it makes it less complex to like illustrate and work over. But a lot of illustrators often put their line work and their color layers on separate layers. Um, I think it's all about preference. Whichever one works best for you or feel more comfortable, I say explore both. Right now, we're working with like the lines, we're working with the coloring on the same line. We're working with the coloring with our line work at the same time. So right now I'm just kind of defining the face and going in, and let's see, just adding these shapes of shadows that I see on the picture reference. So right under the arm here, right under the arm. And we're starting with shadows, and we're going to work our way up to highlights. And so right now, I want to find a good medium color to make my shadows on his skin. So it's not going to be exactly like the image, because I don't want to have too many dark darks. And I'm blocking in the colors, because what you can do after you have the shades blocked in is take your smudge tool and just really go in and smudge out and fade out the shadows and lines. So that's why it's okay to have just block in what you see, because you're going to go in and kind of fade out and adjust your lines as you go. So looking at the arm, the shadow kind of travels down the arm. This bottom. And I also see on the shoulder blade here, there's like so this is where fine tuning comes in. You can adjust things as you see them fit. And it's really about how you're observing the image. So like the shoulder blades right here. And it's still the same rules of looking at negative space. So this is like looking at negative space on more of a micro scale. Whereas on the last lesson, we was looking at negative space on a macro scale. Like we kind of stepped back from the image and saw how to compose the image by looking at negative space. Now we're looking at how to compose your shadows and highlights by looking at negative space. So I noticed that I have a few of, let's see, copy and paste. And I noticed sometimes I accidentally draw on the wrong layer. So the way that I fix that is I just copy and paste, and I just drag down the part that I drew on the wrong layer back to the layer that I'm working on. And then I merge those two layers together so that it can be corrected. Alrighty, so I'm gonna finish this top part, and then we're gonna go to more broader, broader highlights and shadows. But I want to show you guys the patterns of how I just go in and I carve out a shadow line. And it's also good to recognize the bigger picture of how and why the shadows are where they're at. So right now, it seems like all of the main shadows are on the left side of the characters. So if you look right here, in front right here, the shadows are mainly on the left side, which means that you have to think of where your light source would be. Since all the shadows are on the left side, that means most likely your light source is probably coming from this top right side over here. So we put a mini light right there. That shows that since the light is reflecting this way, all the shadows are being casted on the opposite side of where the light is. So that's how, when even if you don't have a picture reference or something, it's good to determine where your light source is so that you can have an understanding. Even with the basketball right here, you see the shadow. You see the shadow is on his left side and his right side is a little lighter. That just shows us that the light source is coming from this side. So that's a good thing to identify and recognize as you're starting your illustrations, or if you're not drawing from a picture reference, just give yourself a light source that you can work with, and that'll help you define how you're going to color in and shade your illustration. If you're working off of an image, working straight from an image, then try to identify which side most of the shadows are being casted on. And you can normally identify where the light source is coming from once you identify the side that the shadows are being casted on, if that makes sense. So I'm going through and just adding the shadows that I see from the image. And I know that they're being casted on this left side here. And we kind of cut off this guy's face here, but I'm gonna improvise. Alrighty, so just going in and defining. So now let's pay attention to some of the highlights. As I block in those shadow areas, I'm just grabbing the smudge tool and kind of working in those shadows. But let's do the same thing and put some highlights in there. So the main arm highlights are, let's see, I kind of want to make his skin tone a little bit more neutral, because the highlights I want to grab are about, say, just make him a little lighter than the regular skin tone. So the highlights that I see are, right now I see highlights in like this area right here, highlight on the basketball. We see highlights like in the back of the neck and the ear, and some on the nose and lip areas, and even right here. So we're identifying where those highlights are at, so that we can go in and just block them in the same way. So I kind of want to get this highlight here. And sometimes it seems insignificant to go in and put highlights and shadows and things, but once you go through this small step details, and I'm loosely doing this as well. Like, you can be way more precise I like to approach a lot of my artwork more loosely and more organic. So I use the picture reference, but I also just kind of use my own approach. One, because I know that these highlights that I'm filling in, so we have a lip right here. I'm going to be kind of shading them in and shading them out as well. So I'm just finding and identifying the areas where they're going to be. Let's say like down his arm, so that I can grab my smudge tool and just blend these two together. And it's still a push and pull. So looking at your highlights and kind of merging some of them with the shadows. And what you realize is that there's three, you have three shapes or forms of colors that you're working with now, which you have your base undertone, which is the undertone that you started with, and then you added a darker side to it, which is the shadows, and your highlights kind of redefines those shadows. And the cool part is, under your darks, if you want to make darker darks in your darks, you can do that. Let's see, like, I kind of want to take this chin and add like another dark layer. Uh, and, so the rule of thumb is once you define where the main highlights are and where the main shadows are, you can always go in and add more darker portions to the darks that you already have. And you can add lighter versions to the other parts that you have. So let's see. This is what we're working with. And at the very end, I'm gonna just go in with more shading, or more, I'm gonna go back in and redefine the lines that we're working with. So let's identify the highlights on this shirt right here, on his shirt. Mainly this whole area right here. The shirt is more, I'm gonna just darken it a little bit. The shirt is more like opaque, or not opaque, but it has more so like two color tones opposed to more highlights and shadows. But I do see on this side right here, and then there's some streaks going within those shadows. So just draw it in loosely, kind of fade them in as you go. And sometimes it looks, sometimes when you're close up on the image, it looks like it's like messy or something. But once you back, close up, it looks more messy. But once you zoom out and see it from the bigger picture, you'll see how the effects of those highlights and shadows, even if they're messy, once you zoom back, you can see the bigger picture of like, oh, snap, the detail is starting to show more. And that's why I like having, I like having these organic lines and scratches, and it doesn't have to be, it don't have to be all the way perfected, because when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture of your drawing, even with all the small imperfections and things, it just adds texture to the image when you're zoomed out, especially on like digital images, because a lot of times I see people, they think of digital images and they think like, oh, it got to be sharp and technological and like crisp and things, but you can treat a digital image the same way that you would treat a painting or something that wasn't digital. So I think we just got to give ourselves creative freedom sometimes, and you use the picture reference as a reference. Creative decision, creative I can't think of the word. Do you have creative control of the image? And the goal is to really make it your own. And I'm gonna just throw like pupils. So I'm not even really drawing Michael Jordan right now. I'm just really capturing the pose of what he's doing. And then, you want to have hard shadow under, and these shadows under here. So I'm going in within the shadows that I already have and understanding that black, we use it as the line work, but black is the ultimate shadows. So I could have, went in and did all my shadows with black, but I kind of like just going in with a darker tone. Then after I get the darker tones of the skin down, I go in and use the black as a like an ultimate shadow into, or to really fill in and give the depth of the muscles more, bring them out a little more. So the same thing on his elbow right here, because you're gonna have to. Well, I'm gonna have to go in with the black again, anyways, because I'm kind of covering up some of the line work that I did. So I just kind of used the black to go back in and redefine those shadow areas. Alrighty. And let's do the basketball real quick. And I wanted to spend a little time on this, and we're going to move a little more faster on the other ones. So just kind of go back in and reintroduce your lines. And for the basketball, let's see, we have, but before we put the lines, let's just add the shadows. So we have this right here. Another strategy is if you want to do your shadowing and you don't want to go outside the line, just select the color that the shadow that you're going to be, select the color that you blocked out, and that'll assure you that you can't go outside the lines. That way, if you want to go in, this is a different approach. Like I have my airbrush, and since I know that the color is blocked out, I can kind of go outside the lines and things without having to worry about it. Without having to worry about it, like having to go erase and things and try to get right in between the edges. It's giving me the freedom to get a broad range of strokes. So I just did the highlights and shadows on the basketball with the brush. And now I'm just kind of drawing in the lines of the basketball. Alrighty, so there we have it. And I just think I'm gonna fill this part in with the black, and we're just gonna fade this out like that. So, boom, you can already see that it's getting more detailed just with those little adjustments, you know? So let's continue working our way down. Let's go to this guy here and just finish his arm. We're just gonna add a highlight to the opposite side and get the smudge tool, smudge it in. So I'm repeating the same steps. I identify a highlight, I identify a shadow, and then I blend them. Easy as that. Identify the highlights, identify the shadows, and blend them. And repeat. So I'm kind of making up his face here. He got his nostrils. I'm not gonna get too detailed into the face because we're gonna go back in with our black ink after we finish these highlights and shadows and really redefine and reintroduce the black lines, which will give us the more completed image. So what we're doing here is just creating the undertone shadows and things. Alrighty. So excuse this guy's face. We're gonna fix it up and have it. Yeah, we'll fix the face in a minute. Right now, we're just gonna leave it blank because that's detail that you can do all with your line work. So a rule of thumb, you don't want to start getting into the super detailed parts too soon. You always want to kind of work broad and then knock out the bigger picture first and save your super close and tight details for the last elements. You know, so you just want to identify all of the main parts and save the details and fine tuning for last. Alrighty, so looking at the picture reference, this guy's shirt is more black. So let's try the other strategy again, where we just, boom, I want to highlight his shirt. That way I know that that'll be the only layer that I'm working on. And I want to use the airbrush so that I can have a good gradient. And I just want to fade out the shirt. So the first strategy I was doing was just going directly in with the pen tool and drawing in the highlights and drawing in the shadows, and then smudging them to fade them. This strategy here is more so, which is probably more the easiest strategy, is you just select the blocked out area, which is that's the whole point and reason for creating flat colors in the beginning, so that you can select them and easily block them out. So we just details on the air. Okay, so let's go to with this picture reference. Let's work on the bottom part because this is where the most activity is. But you can already see that the detail and the shading is bringing out it's bringing out the dimensionality of the illustration. So what I see now is, and I'm gonna just be moving the picture reference around as I need. So hopefully that's not a distraction. But now I'm looking at this area right here, the legs and things like that. So let's do the same strategy. I want to focus on his legs. So I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna start one leg at a time. So I'm gonna highlight that leg, and we see that this leg have a lot of shadows on it. So I'm gonna use the same shadows that I did on his skin tone from before. And I want to use the airbrush tool, and it's pretty much that entire leg is shaded in. So, you know, sometimes you don't have to capture highlights. If it's not a highlight present, don't feel like you need to make a highlight and shadow on every single part, because looking at this leg right here, there really aren't any looking at this leg, there really aren't any highlights. Well, it's a slight one, but that's not really a highlight. That's just the same skin tone. So we're avoiding highlights on that one. On this leg, though, there is this shadow, there is a highlight on this back part. So that's one highlight that we want to keep up with. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm actually going to put, boom, bring that layer up. So let's select the other leg, boom, and I want to use the same color. We're going to use airbrush, and we're looking at how the shadow goes down the left side, and we pretty much already have the highlight available. So with that, I'll just use like a little strip of a lighter color. Just that small piece represents the highlight. Alrighty, so let's keep working on. Now we're looking at, I'm looking at this guy's shorts right here. Although they're white, they still have a few areas of shading that can be implemented. So it's like a blue tone hue. I'm going to let's see, I'm gonna use the first strategy that we started with and just kind of go in and block out the colors. Like I could select it, but some parts is just easier to go directly in. Some parts is easier to select and shade and highlight. So this part, I'm going back into the way I did first elements of just putting in the color that I see. And I'm looking at his socks here, they're about the same. And boom, we're just knocking out. And then there's within the shadows, there's a darker part, like right in the cracks or the in between parts. So boom, we block that out, and I want to go in with my smudge tool and just spread those shadows out. And looking at the socks too. So we're spreading it out. So small underground shading. Sometimes it may seem insignificant, but when you step back and look at even the smallest, slightest shading have impact on the direction of your picture. So just capturing the other side, and boom, let's keep moving. As I go, I like to just reintroduce the black lines that were kind of lost. So I'm just going to go in with knees, reintroduce the black lines, and just reintroduce those as I go. And I also want to capture this little just rectangle that's on his shorts right here. So fill that little part in. All right, now we're keeping it moving, keeping it rolling. Let's go to this guy's arm right here since it's right in the frame. I kind of want to adjust the muscles a little bit. So we're going to take that part out. So you can adjust as you go. And I know in the last class, I mentioned that I really like using using the tool, my drawing tool. I like using it on 1% over here, but I'm going up a little higher for this one because I like to use the 1 when I'm blocking it, like when I'm doing the initial illustration. Once you have the initial illustration down, you can kind of see where you want to add more heavier lines, because the black lines actually tie into the shading as well. So it's okay to use heavier lines when you're doing your coloring phase, because black is now becoming a color and not just the line itself. So I'm kind of going in with heavier black line work. Alrighty, so I'm gonna select this guy's arm right here. Excuse me. Select his arm. Get the airbrush tool. I'm just looking at the left side of the arm, and since it's a lot of darks going on right here, a lot of shadows and darks, I'm just gonna, don't be afraid to embrace the shadows. Like he have a pretty darker arm right here. It might be scary at first. You're like, oh no, it's too dark. But you can understand that sometimes the deep dark contrast really allows for your highlights to save it, and it makes it pretty cool because the highlights serve a bigger purpose when your shadows are dominant in some areas. So like his arm right here, although it's super dark, that'll make that highlight just make the highlight pop even more because the darks are so dominant. So same on the shoulder right here. It's heavy shadowing, but that's going to make this highlight right here pop even more. So boom, and I'm just going to smudge it all together. Alrighty, let's keep moving. Now we're going to do the face right here. Again, he have heavy shadows. He's just more of a darker complected character. So I'm just going to fill in the shadows. And, you know, this is also hints at the culture as well, is, you know, well, a culture that I'm familiar with, I would say, which is Black culture and more African American people. Like, what I've realized in traditional artwork and paintings is that a lot of artists shy away from capturing Blackness and capturing darkness and things in their art, well, in artwork. One artist that I really love who does it the best to me is Kerry James Marshall. Man, he really captures Blackness in artwork. And sometimes that makes an image stand out all alone by itself, is being able to capture those darkest shadows and that Black skin tone. Like, I think that's something we should have pride in. And even myself, you know, I've always used to stick to, like, you know, lighter browns, or I'll be nervous to make someone too dark. So I'm like add a highlight like the lighter skin tones. But I think representation wise, we want to, you know, it's okay to illustrate dark skin. And we want to give it the same respect as we do like lighter skins and things like that. So we should treat it the same. So we're moving to the next arm right here. It kind of cuts off, but I'm going to improvise. I can't really see it on the picture reference, but I'm gonna improvise and kind of use the same strategies and tools. So on this arm, the shadows is more on this bottom part right here, and it's a little on top right here in the crease. And since the arm is bending, we know there's going to be shadow on the inside of the arm, you know, inside the arm, things like that. So for the highlight, I'm going to grab this and let's see, try to grab this color. Gonna make it a little lighter. And let's see, the highlights are kind of on the shoulder blade right here. Some a little at the bottom down there. We know since the light source is over here, it's probably a highlight on that side of the arm as well. So boom, just like that, we have shading on the arm. Now I'm going to go in with the inking tool. I can deselect that and kind of adjust. And I want to bring his jersey up a little bit. Bring the jersey up. And let's focus on the jersey next, actually. So, same thing. Shadows on the hand. Being conscious of the light source on the left, I'm going to put the shadows to the right. And boom, so there we have that guy. Let's knock out his shirt real quick. So I'm going to select his shirt. There we go. All right, shirt selected, and I see so this top part is like a way lighter than the bottom part. So I'm just going to get my inking tool and block out this light part that I see right here. And I'm just going to fill it in like that. And boom, highlight is created. And then there's the deeper shadows in shadow the darker part of the shirt. So I'm gonna try to capture some of those wrinkles that I see. Boom. Some of the folds right here. Alrighty. Let's see. Boom. Folds. Then we're gonna get the smudge tool and just kind of blend those out. Let's blend these folds and wrinkles out. I want to fill this one in. And I kind of see some right here. So as we blend them out, alrighty. That makes it easier to capture those small details on the shirts. So that's enough right there. Let's move on to the shorts. Boom. Let's see. So as you guys can see, it's just repetitive. You keep, I just continue going to the next block or going to the next blocked out color. And I just add the highlights and shadows to each section that I go to. And, it's the same process. That's how you stay consistent, is trying to follow the same process. I do kind of switch back and forth from, blocking out the color and using the airbrush tool, or I might block out the color and just draw in the shadows and then fade it like that. It's really up. I like using both because in some tighter areas, it's easier to shade it, like just block out the color and shade it in. But in more broader areas where you have more space, it's easier to just use the airbrush tool. So like it's up to you how you want to switch back and forward. I would say that the airbrush tool saves a lot of time, save a lot more time. It's easier to block out. The only con is with the airbrush tool, you don't really get into the small, like there's certain smaller details that you got to capture with like this right here, like those small creases that you want to capture the shape of. It's easier to kind of go in and draw it in and create your gradients like that. So it's push and pull. There's multiple ways to do it. I like doing it like this. And even with the red, even with the shorts, we can capture the shadows on the red parts of the shorts. As you can see, the left side is, so I just grab this same color, make it a little shade darker. So this is something I can use the airbrush tool on. Like I just kind of want to make this side a little darker than the other. Nothing too major. And then I want to take this side and just have a highlight, because you can kind of see that there's a highlight along the right side of him. So boom, that's done. Let's go to his legs. Let's finish his legs. And his legs are almost completely dark. So we want to respect the shadows on his legs. So I'm gonna it's a good opportunity to just use the airbrush tool. And as you're looking at them, there's almost no highlights. So I'm gonna just kind of make his legs completely dark, but I'm still gonna leave just a slight highlight just because I think that makes it creative control. You can still add a slight highlight. And the same with the shoes. And then because with the shoes, I'm definitely you definitely want to go in, and this is where you can add your own style. Like go in and add this design on the shoes, the Jordan design, or you can make your own designs. But those, these type of designs is what makes illustrations dope, and that's those little attention to details is what actually captures the culture itself. But like we said at first, we want to knock out the broad part first. So we want to knock out the shadows and highlights. Then we can go in with our black and just go in with more detailed parts. Like you don't want to get caught up into doing little small detailed parts before you finish the bigger picture thing. So I'm just kind of throw a small shadow on the socks just so they can see where the light source is coming from. And we're going to leave it at that. So let's work our way. Let's knock out the back guys over here. Hopefully you guys are catching on to the pattern. This should make it super simple and easy. Let's do this guy in the front. Let's do his shirt right here. Same process. I like to grab the color from, you can either grab the color from the picture reference, or you can grab the color from your image that you created and just go a shade darker. I'm gonna use the picture reference. For this one, I'm gonna use the airbrush. And we see that he has this shadow coming kind of on the left side of him. And then there's this diagonal line that's kind of going under his shoulder blade right here. So boom, you want to capture those little shadows under here. And let's go to the highlights. There's a line of highlight that's kind of right above this crease right here. Then the top of the shoulders, you have highlights up there, highlights on the shoulders. It's a few streaks of highlights that's going down his back like that. And we're just going to take the blend tool and just kind of fade these all together. So if we're closer up, we take the blend tool and just fade these together so you can see what's going on. And, if you want to improvise, like I see more shadows on the edge right here. And usually, since I've drawn so many images, I've gained the understanding that sometimes, like even if you don't see certain shadows, you can create your own based on knowing that I know that this color here, where the brown meets the blue, I know that I want to have a contrast between those. So sometimes I can add my own. I added this shadow here so that it can bounce off against this brown right there. So even though I didn't see that shadow on there, like it's good to sometimes create your own. So even like on the same as right here. I kind of want to create a shadow that goes along the brown so that it'll pop out and have contrast. So let's go to the shorts. Boom. It should be pretty simple. I'm gonna grab the color from here. We use the airbrush. And But yeah, just kind of airbrush those shadows in right there. It's pretty simple right there. And go in and add the little small streaks that's going horizontal. And we want to take the same red, give a slight highlight to the top part, be real subtle, and that's it. Those are the sharks. Let's take his arms. Alrighty. I'm gonna just do all of his skin at the same time. Alrighty, so go to the brush tool, and I recognize he's a lighter skin complexion, so it's kind of like we have the shadows down. We just got to bring out the highlight of the skin tone. So I'm just using this brush tool. This back arm is way highlighted way more. That back arm here is highlighted way more. So this one is kind of working in reverse. We have a lot of the shadows down already, and we want to bring out more of the highlights. And it kind of looks a little weird, so let's find balance between the two. And I'm just gonna add these. Let's create a balance and add like more redder tones. So in between there, just blocking out colors as you see it. And then you have deep, heavy shadows on the inner kneecaps. So so boom, we have the highlights. Now we're doing the shadows. We did it kind of reversed on this. We add the highlights first. Now we're doing the shadows, but either way you do it, as long as you go through the process, it's going to turn out better than you expect. So as you can see, I'm just going in, and I'm not super, like, I guess as an artist, an illustrator, I don't really worry about mistakes that much. I know a lot of people get like, oh no, I made a mistake, or oh no, it doesn't look good. I more so work off of the mechanics of things. Like, it don't have to look perfect. I know that I captured that highlight right there and that shadow right there. So I know in the back of my mind, in a bigger picture of it, even though it doesn't look like super perfected and things, I'm comfortable with knowing that when I zoom out, it's going to make sense when I zoom out, because these are principles pretty much. So even on the most undetailed picture, or even on a super flat made up character, you can follow these same principles and it's going to create a cool depth of field. And you can do it loosely. It don't have to be super precise. It could be loose, and you're going to get the same type of effect, because what makes it a principle means that it's going to work regardless of how you do it. As long as you add a highlight and a shadow, it's going to come out looking like something dope every time. So that's why I'm not too super worried about how precise I am with the shadows and highlights, because I'm just following the principle. And it also helps you work faster too. Like when you get too caught up on how well you're doing your details and things, when you get too caught up on how well you're doing your details, sometimes you lose inspiration because you're thinking too hard. You don't have to think like Drake say, don't think about it too much. Just follow the process, trust the process. That's all you gotta do. So as I'm going along, I'm just capturing these parts. I got shadows coming from the bottom. Take that same color, highlight coming from the top. Because after a while, you know, what I find out is after a while, I don't even look at the picture reference as much anymore because I found comfort. I found comfort in the pattern of what I'm doing already. But it is good to look at the picture reference often, though, because sometimes when we use our own creative commons, we miss out on certain little key details. So you do want to capture the key details, but don't be so caught on it to where you get uninspired or you're moving so slow to where you don't even want to finish anymore. So boom, capture the key details. Alrighty, so boom, I think it's looking dope so far. I do see in this area right here is mainly all black, and so I'm gonna do that same thing. I'm gonna just add, I like how you have these little stripes on his shorts, so I'm gonna just add a small detail. But for this inner part, this isn't black, but it's close enough to black. I'm gonna just fill this all in. And then what I'm gonna do now is select that whole area. And so most times we work from all black, add highlights, and pretty much I'm taking that black area and I'm just gonna bring a bit of highlights into it, but not too much because as I'm looking at it, it's already naturally all black. So boom, that's about all I need right there. And I actually like this blue color more than this brown. So I'm gonna just kind of bring that blue down. And then for the leg right here, I want to add like, it's more dark, I want to separate the leg from the shorts. So I'm going to add this this black shadow coming from the leg, and just smudge that in. So it's the art. It's the art of improvising. You know, same for this back leg over here. It's more, although his leg is blue right here, I'm going to make it consistent. And I'm going to drag the same color because it's kind of in the background. So we know that he don't have blue skin, but we're just kind of, we know that it's in the shadows and you can't really see the skin tone. So we're going to work with that. Boom. Now let's keep moving forward. So I kind of want to define what's going on back here. Oh yeah, that's another shoe on top of the leg right there. So it might look a little weird, but it's cool. Throw in a few defining lines, and we're going to keep moving forward. A few defining lines right here. You want to separate these two from each other, and boom. So let's keep going. Hopefully we're making good time, but we just got like 2 more characters left, and you can already see how just those highlights and shadows have turned the image from 2D and very flat to more 3-dimensional and like more thought out. Let's see. So I'm gonna move forward. Let's see. There's a random line on his shirt, so I'm gonna fill this in. Not sure how it got there, but gonna fill that back in. All right. So let's go to the next guy, which is the guy that's blocking out here. And let's see what colors he's wearing. So same thing, the front of his shirt is majority black or in the shadows. So I'm going to, for this strategy, I'm going to use the, this is super defined. I'm going to just draw in where I see the shadows. And it looks like you have a white t-shirt on under that. So we're going to draw in the shadows and just fill that in. Uh-oh, I think I drew it on the wrong layer. Yep, drew it on the wrong layer. So back to the right layer, draw in the shadow and fill it in. Boom. And I want to, he have a t-shirt on under this, so I kind of want to define that. So I'm gonna use this same white right here and give him a t-shirt. And let's fill that in. Boom, t-shirt is on. And within the t-shirt, let's just use the same shadows. Shadows right here. And on the undershirt, there's an area in between right here that's like kind of makes that shape right there. So what I'm doing is I'm following off shapes really. That's really what I'm looking at when I'm creating these shapes. I'm just looking at the shapes of the shadows from the picture reference and not thinking about it too much. I just kind of organically draw the shape that come to mind. Like I don't have to be super dead on and precise with it. I just know that I kind of see stuff happening right there. So I created what I see. And cool. It works out. So the highlight on this is kind of back there. So let's fade this in so you guys can get a closer look. And now we're just, now you're just blending it in and making it look dope. Alrighty, so let's see. All right, so let's knock out his face. Same thing. There's a heavy shadow on the left side. Let's see the left side of his face. Boom, so I'm just filling that in. Left side of the face, and you kind of have the funny facial expression right here. So mouth is open. And like we said, we're going to get into the facial expressions towards the end, so I'm not going to do too much, but that is a major shadow on this side, so we want to capture that shadow, shade it in, boom, and there you have it. And for his pants, he's pretty much, I have him like a deep green tone. He's pretty much wearing like black pants, but I like this green tone, so I'm just gonna add some black shadows to it. And he don't really have any highlights on his pants, so I'm not gonna add any highlights. I'm just gonna add more defining shadows to him. And boom, there we have it. And also his shoes, we gotta fix these right here. It's kind of more so like a curve going up. And this, his feet is kind of curving up right there. Something like that. So boom, simple, easy. Let's capture his arm and we're almost there. So it's not too hard. Hopefully you guys are catching on to the pattern that we're following of how to shade in your illustrations. You pretty much capture the color, or you will first, what I showed in the last class, you block in the colors that you want to use. You block in, you fill in your colors. They don't have to have any shading or highlights in them. You just want to first fill in everything that you see. Then once you have all your things filled in, that'll give you the opportunity to be able to select those blocked in colors and work within those and add highlights and shadows as you go and as you see them. So that's exactly what I'm doing. And we're just repeating that process and not really focusing too much on like super tight details. We're just we're just following the principle and adding highlights and shadows, because the super tight detail is going to come back when you're at the very end of this. You're going to want to then get your pen tool again. You even go back in with your size 1 pen tool, and that's where you're going to go back and add the fine tuning and fine details of things. So we're going to get to the facial expressions and all those things when you get to the fine tuning. So that's why I haven't focused on just putting in faces and things like that yet, because we want to capture the base of what's going on. And we want to capture the base of the tone. So booyah. I think this is the last. Let me just kind of get a defined, more darker shadow under his arm. I'm gonna just use the black, because we want to separate his arm from the background, so that people know. And I'm gonna just use the blend tool to kind of fade those out. All right. So this is the last character right here, guy with the yellow shirt. And let's see, let's knock it out. Booyah, guy with the yellow shirt. He have, let's see, let's start with his shorts. Uh-oh, wrong layer. Let's go to the right layer. We're gonna start with his basketball shorts. And it's pretty simple. He is wearing, just have slight shadows on the right. Shadows on the right. Little shadow under his legs right there. And then select the color, do a lighter shade of red. And we want to add highlights on the opposite side. Boom. Same with the shirt. Select the shirt. And I'm gonna start with a lighter yellow actually. It's kind of like the whole side is, yeah, like a slight highlight on the side of the shirt. And we're gonna add the shadows. So I know it's pretty repetitive, but sometimes those are the best ways to learn, is by seeing it being repeated, especially for those who's trying to learn how to draw or who's like at the beginner level. It's good to see how people repeat the same process. That way you know that it works. And with the shadows on this shirt, it's mainly like a few streaks and lines. So for the beginners, you get to see how the principle applies every time. For those who are more advanced watching this, you're probably tired of seeing me doing this because you already know these things. But we just want to have courtesy to those who are watching and know that advanced or beginner, this is a principle that everybody can use to apply to their artwork in their approach to making art. It's going to make it stand out and it's going to make it more impactful and in some instances more realistic. So I'm just going to add these same streaks on the shorts right here. Booyah. So let's go to his skin tone. He's also dark complected young fellow. So I'm going to use the black as more of a shadow of a shadow on this side. Use the black under his legs. His legs have his shadows. And now when I'm looking at it, his leg kind of on the picture, his legs, this line is all one and the same. So I just want to adjust that and make it to where his leg is all, it starts under the pants. Uh-oh. I am on the wrong layer, so go to the right layer. Put that right there and boom. And that's a good shadow. So let's do some slight highlights. And I'm gonna keep the highlights simple. Well, let's see. I got more of I changed his color a little bit. So we're gonna use a highlight based off what we have here. Just a streak of highlight on his calf muscles. Nothing too major, not thinking about it too much. Get this smudge tool and kind of smudge it in. Boom, we got the highlight. And his arms are more dark. So also his neck. So right now we have the highlighted color. So I'm just gonna put airbrush tool. I'm just gonna put like a slight highlight on his back of his neck. And I'm gonna use the black as the shadowing. So boom. So even though he's like the charcoal gray, it's cool. There's some charcoal gray people out there. And there we have it. So slight shadows on the socks. So now we've completed that aspect of it. We've completed the highlights and shadows of this image. So now you can see, and I kind of cut his foot off over here. So I'm gonna just improvise and add a foot again, because I don't know when I cut it off. So for those who are watching, what we learned today is highlights and shadows. Another element of it is also, before we forget, is paying attention to the shadows on the ground too. So now that we have the characters' shadows and shaded in, and I know I said in the last class, you usually want to start with the backgrounds and work our way to the front, but let's add a simplified background now that we have our characters done. So I'm gonna take the characters off for a second, and I'm gonna create a new layer. And let's see. So right now I'm looking at the picture reference, and I'm seeing where this line is right here, where the foot, it kind of intersects the shoes, a lot of the shoes and things. So I want to recreate that same line on my page, but on another layer, on the background layer. So it's kind of go like right in between there. So, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make a makeshift, I'm gonna create a makeshift background for them in context to the image. So let's say that it goes right here. So let's say that this is the background within this square right here. Alrighty. I want to capture this same gray that they have here. And I want to put it on the background layer that I just created. Nope, it's not working. It must mean it's a crack in the image all right, so that should fill in. There we go. Alrighty, so what I'm realizing is we have to color in, block in the shoe colors on these. So I'm just kind of giving them shoe colors. And so it's acting weird. So let's see. Let's just say that's a white shoe. And his sock is filled in. Boom. Let's just say this shoe is white. So sometimes, when you add a different color background, you get to see what things you didn't fill in. And since the background was already white, I forgot to fill in the white shoes because we didn't think about them. That's cool though. Socks right here. And I'm not going to think about it too much. I am going to give this guy some white shoes as well. Boom. Alrighty. So now we're still thinking about shadows. Now we just have to add the shadows on the ground, and that'll give us more context of who's on the ground. And like some of them are jumping, some of them are on the ground. So we want to bring out the depth of field like that. So these are just going to be horizontal lines that we add onto the ground. But before I do that, what I want to do is give the ground a gradient. So I'm going to capture this color. I'm glad I took that back because I was on the wrong layer. I want to capture this color, and I want to make a lighter part. So same thing apply. I'm just adding the highlight and the shadow, except I'm adding highlight to the ground. So we already have a base color. So I'm just kind of going in and giving it a highlight, knowing that the light source is on the right. I'm going to kind of put the highlights coming from the right side, and that way naturally the left side is more shadowed. Now I want to go in with the more defined shadows coming from under your feet. Those lines under your feet, that way you can see who's standing where, whose foot is lifted off the ground, who's on the ground. And it doesn't look like they're just floating in space. So we also see that there are some streaks going like in that way. And with things like this, it's cool to use texture too. So I'm gonna try something different. And the cool thing about Procreate is that they provide different textures and things that you can use. So I just lowered the opacity. I found a texture that's kind of like grungy type of feel. And I just wanted to add a texture to the ground so it can look like concrete. And I'm actually going to use that. So this is under charcoal, a compressed charcoal fill. And I'm going to use that same charcoal to do these shadows on the ground, so it can look like they're on concrete and not like all smoothed out and things. Give it a cool texture. I'm gonna kind of shade in this right side a little darker color because I know it's the shadows, and boom, there we have it. Let's fill in these socks right here. Uh-oh. Fill in the socks of this player. That's kind of weird. See, it's doing that because I kind of did the gradient for the socks before I was able to do, before I filled it in a blank color. So this is why it's important to block out your colors first, because if you forget to block out your colors and you try to go in and like fill in the color, it'll if you have a gradient on the color you're trying to fill in, the computer, it won't capture the thing that you're trying to fill in. But that's cool. Just gonna add like a mini shadow right here on these socks with a airbrush tool. There we go. That way it's back consistent. And no, that's the gist of it. That's like the gist of it. Now we have what went from a flat colored image to they're almost 3D. And for the background, we're going to do something super simple for the background, and then we're going to wrap up the lesson. As you see, they have, like I said, I mentioned in a recent class that your backgrounds are what set the tone of your image. So we want to set the tone for this by giving it like this brownish background. And I see how they have like some bricks right here. I'm not even gonna put a lot of detail and attention into it. I'm gonna just create my own bricks. So it's kind of like, I just see lines like this and super rough. One, because the background is secondary to what we see in the foreground. So taking different colors, I'm just gonna put these horizontal lines that represents bricks down. going to use different variants of colors. I'm going to use red. Use red right here and kind of make it like a collage almost. So boom, just throwing in patterns and textures that that I can use to blend in the background. Then I see that the wall is more of a white color, so I'm going to select this again, and I'm going to use maybe this color right here for the wall. And we want to get this wall, this color right here. And I want to explore the textures because, so this is fun. You know, you want to use different textures, especially for things like backgrounds and stuff. So let's see, let's try out, I kind of like the charcoals, elements, charcoal. Let's try out this burnt tree texture. And I want to make it a little darker. Let's just see what it looks like. Oh, that's pretty cool. I'm gonna lower the opacity just a little bit so it won't be too heavy on there. But we just want to give it a cool little texture in the background so that it looks like they're playing in front of something that's tangible. All right. Let me move to the reference image. And even on top of these bricks, I can still add a texture on top. And I just want to add, you know, same thing applies. You want to go in with certain shadows. Even if we're using this texture, we can apply it the same type of way. I'm going to lower the opacity a little more. And boom. So that's pretty much it right there. Of course, there's a lot more detailing I can do in this picture, and I'm going to go in and finish the picture for sure with more detail and line work. Like I'm gonna go define the shoes, define different shapes. There's probably more shadows that I can add in certain more strategic shadows that I can add in different places and areas. But today I just wanted to give you guys the gist of what was going on, the gist of how to color in your flat images and complete an image from the sketch all the way to the coloring phase. So that's what we did today. The very last thing is I want to give them a backboard. And this is the last thing. I'm the type that can be going forever. So sometimes I have to give myself a stopping point. This is the stopping point. I do want to, you know, I want him to be dunking on something. So let's give him a background, right? Or a backboard. Kind of like I'm making this backboard up. Let's put it on its own layer, actually. So I'm gonna just create a new layer. And we're gonna draw out a makeshift backboard that kind of goes like maybe right there and fill it in, boom. And let's see, I think this part right here can be gone. Let's see. There's a backboard, and we just gonna follow the same, kind of trim it a little bit, make it look somewhat professional, and boom, same principle. Gonna highlight it, add a little bit of shadow. Use the airbrush. Not gonna overdo it, just a little bit of shadow right here. It's already white, so we don't have to add a highlight. And for the very last part, we're gonna end it. I'm gonna just add a little backboard, the backboard square. So, and then at the very end, I'm gonna just do like a cool little pole or something that makes it make sense. So now they're actually playing on the, he's not dunking on an invisible basketball goal. And same thing apply, even with the smallest of things, we're not gonna add a shadow because it's black, but we're gonna add a highlight to this basketball goal right here. It's too heavy. Just a slight highlight to the basketball goal pole so that you can see. And we know that this shadow probably projects. Let's just say the shadow is kind of projecting off the wall, the background wall right there. So this is still highlights and shadows, but just kind of improvising how we see the basketball go and things. So there you have it, guys. Highlights and shadows. I haven't put in any facial features and details with line work, but the main goal was to show you guys how to take and block out your colors and add the highlights and shadows needed so that it can pop from the background and it can really add dimension to your drawings and illustrations. And that's exactly what we did. I might definitely post the completed drawing somewhere with the extra detail added and things. Definitely going to post it on my Instagram. But in terms of for the lesson today, this was what I really wanted to cover, is how to do the highlights and shadows. So hope you guys enjoyed it. This has been another episode of Capture the Culture Illustrated Masterclass with Lakeem Wilson. And next time, look forward to some more principles to learn that's going to make your artwork 10 times better than your competitors, and all the time. And at the same time, it's going to allow your artwork to capture the culture in a way that makes it impactful and empowering to your audience. So without further ado, I'm logging out. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.